First, we had the trailer, and now we have access to the game itself, thanks to a preview build code. Mafia Definitive Edition is already shaping up very nicely ahead of its release on September 25th. A beautifully sculpted game with great lighting. It rounds out the Mafia trilogy package too, and I'm here today to talk about it in this video with my friend and colleague, Tom Morgan. So how you doing there, Tom?
Yeah, very good, thanks, Alex. How's it going there?
It's good. You and I spent a little bit of time playing this game, and specifically more you, because I'm busy with other work at the moment, and you had time to play it out on your PC there in a preview code. So what were your PC specs that you were running on, and how did it actually run in this early build?
Yeah, so I have just like a GTX 1080 Ti, not the top of the line setup.
Still pretty great.
Still,
so.
yeah. I mean, I'd imagine a lot of people will be running on, GTX 1060s or something thereabouts,
like that,
yeah. So certainly it's competitive, and it got, most of the footage here I've captured at 4K 30 capped. Mm-hmm. I've gone for maxed out settings. Then again, I also tried to, see if I could get 60 FPS, and, I bumped it down to 1080p for that, but yeah, it does seem to be already pretty well optimized. Like, in terms of the performance side, like, it rolls straight off from Mafia and Mafia 3, rather. And yeah, really good stuff so far.
God damn it!
So how is it playing in comparison to, I would say, maybe Mafia 3, but also the first game, which is actually quite old now, or the original, I should say?
It gets the technical side down pretty well. Like, it feels like a modern game. I think that's the most important part of what Hangar 13 is going for with this. I covered the narrative trailer that they released, and it looked great, and it uses this sort of cover shooting mechanic which we're familiar with now. When this game was released in 2002, you had to get everything down perfectly. There was no cover shooting, there was no, you could hide behind objects, but it was always, you had to maneuver yourself very carefully, and
to get the shots off and things like that. It's more it has, unlike the first game, which was very a PC focused title, this one is obviously releasing as a multi-platform game, and takes a lot of the learned lessons about third person design since then. How does that go over to like the taxi faring and the racing and all those other areas of the game? Like, what is that like?
It's a night and day difference. It really, really is. I can't stress how frustrating the original game was because
yeah, it has that infamous racing mission which was what I was thinking about right here.
Yeah. I mean, that's incidentally, I captured a lot of this game. I'll go back to capture more for this video, but I've cut it about here, like doing this chat with you, even in the remade version of that, which is in here, and it looks incredible.
Okay.
I kind of came fifth in the end because a bunch of AI racers just zoomed past me right at the finishing line. But yes, that is very much in. And the driving, as you say, is kind of a really core part of what the original Mafia game is, because the story goes, you play a taxi driver who's kind of got himself mixed up in Mafia dealings. And so the first maybe 2-3 missions are primarily just chauffeuring these guys around town, and really in the original the mechanics for that were solid, but the Mafia 2-3 engine, and is what they're using here, really nails the handling of these vehicles. They're a lot more fun to use. It's modernized to a point where you can use a controller. It feels like it's fun. And even in that racing mission, the infamous racing mission, it's actually really engaging. It really gets your adrenaline going just to drive at pace.
Yeah, I think looking at it from when I was just looking at the game, I was really impressed. And as you mentioned to me as well too, is kind of the rendering of these old 1930s and I guess early 1940s car models that the game has. It's just an incredible looking, the way they do the materials on the car models in this, post Mafia 3 physically based rendering pipeline, along with really, a really good looking SSR implementation on the highest settings here. They just tend to look really realistic looking, and you can see that also in the game's preview screenshots that they released as well too.
I think so. I think the visual highlight is definitely those vehicles, and how physically correct a lot of the lighting is across them. The video capture speaks volumes on that, but It does seem like something you'd see in a really decent racing game, racing sim.
Yeah.
There's a lot of beautiful reflections, even if they are, screen space reflections.
Yeah.
It looks great. That's why I'm doing so many sort of cinematic shots where I'll like turn the camera around it as we're driving, and like almost suicidally kind of charging forward, hoping I don't get hit. It does look wonderful, combined with the motion blur as well. Obviously, I've mixed the capture here between 30 FPS and 60, but I think it does hold up at 30, and that kind of approximates, I guess, what we'd get on console, down the line. We're kind of expecting a 30 FPS game, but it should work. It should be fine.
Kind of getting back, as you were saying, passing by in the car across these environments, I think Mafia 1's strength in comparison to its sequels was a more constrained design, is that, you have these missions that you go on, and the open world, I'll put it in big quotations here, is more just as you termed it, a kind of LA Noire style open world where it exists there in the background, but it's not actually the game's design. So in those missions where they funnel you along a path, that's when the game, they spend a lot of the artist time on it and making sure the assets and lighting are all placed really well. That gives it a great level of polish. And that's, I think, where this Mafia 1 Definitive Edition, this preview version, looks really great. It just looks extremely polished. And whether it's, looking at the post effects or the lighting, or even the new facial tech, like the facial capture that they're using. The first game was like a cinematic experience constrained by the hardware of the time. And as they kept going on through Mafia 2 and 3, they kept upping it. And Mafia 2 was actually a really big step, I would say. Mafia 3 also has really great acting, and I would say a lot of really great facial capture. But then going back, to this old game, there's almost no continuity with the old game here other than the fact that the design is similar. Like they've redone everything. And if they had to redo all the actors and the facial capture here with this really high quality, that's really impressive.
I think so. I mean, yeah, you're right. Mafia 2 felt like the big break where suddenly they upped their game. I really think the greatest thing about the series is that the story is pretty solidly written. Like there's a good narrative through line that kind of keeps you engaged the whole way. The kind of device of the first one was you're going through the missions as flashbacks. You're telling every chapter of your ascent through the ranks of the Mafia, and it really works well. There's now a far better rendering pipeline to deliver those moments, those narrative beats, with some great lighting, I think, and the materials on like the facial capture are, superb. I was told there was a new capture rig to make that work, and it ups the ante over Mafia 3, so that's a plus.
So I guess moving from here, you had the preview version on PC, which is great looking, and you ran it on a very high-end GPU, a bit older now, but a very high-end GPU. I guess I wonder what the compromises or how they're going to bring it to the consoles in light of Mafia 3 here. Like, are we going to be seeing like the same usual divide that we saw on Mafia 3 where it's like 1440p or so on the PS4 Pro, or how exactly will the base consoles figure this out? What do you think?
I think it will translate pretty much as is from the setup in Mafia 3, and that's no bad thing. It does scale pretty well. Yeah, I think this is a multi-platform engine with a console focus first. It does mean that we get a great version on every platform these days, and I'm pretty pleased. I know that when we come to cover this, it'll run pretty well on PS4, base PS4 upwards. The bigger question will be, it'll be at 30 FPS, maybe run at high settings, medium high, but the way the settings on this PC preview build kind of play out, the range from low to ultra doesn't change an awful lot. It's very, very, very incremental how different those settings are.
Since we're going into next gen coming out soon, and this is going to be releasing in that cross-gen period almost.
Yeah.
It should be interesting to see where they take it, because if they're going to be releasing next-gen versions, and the Hangar 13 actually has a pretty good I would say, relationship in the past with like NVIDIA and other, like AMD as well too. Be interesting to see if they ended up replacing that SSR in the game with something like ray traced reflections, which work really well in a city environment. I mean, it's not always perfect for a game that takes place along the countryside or something like that, but in a game like this with its noir setting, with puddles on the ground and a lot of glass and the metals, and I would also say the cars specifically
yes,
too.
The cars,
that would look really awesome with ray traced reflections on next gen consoles, or perhaps I don't know, a 60 FPS mode or something like that. I don't know. I'm excited to see what they do.
I will say I did ask the team about what their plans were for next gen, and you kind of got to. But no developer in their right mind will be drawn on that question right now. Like, if they haven't shown a trailer, if they haven't like announced it fully, they're not going to. Like, yeah, I agree. Ray tracing feels like it would be interesting to see how they balance it out with frame rate and other visual settings to get that running.
Yeah, open world games are going to be a big challenge in next gen for getting ray tracing on them. I almost feel like, because a big part of ray tracing is not just tracing the rays, but also building this kind of bounding volume hierarchy, as it's called, of the environment's geometry. And if there's a lot of geometry and a lot of diverse geometry, like in open world games, it becomes more expensive. So it's going to be I'm curious to see how games like Watch Dogs Legion or this approach their next gen versions, or even Cyberpunk. My goodness.
I was also going to say, like, you mentioned Watch Dogs Legion. At least in the preview build I tried of that, the ray tracing there for an open world, they kind of balanced that out by applying it to some surfaces like puddles, but avoiding it on like big water bodies like the Thames. So, who knows? Maybe that's a strategy they could use for this sort of game as well.
Well, thanks for talking to me about this, Tom.
Yeah, no worries.
And if you did enjoy Tom and I talking about Mafia Definitive Edition in this video, in this preview version of it, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
And of course, if you want to get these videos just as they land, you can hit that bell as well.
And if you want to support more work like this from Digital Foundry in the future, consider supporting us on Patreon to get years worth of Digital Foundry content available in high quality for download.
And lastly, of course, if you want to get in touch with myself, Alex, or the team, just use Twitter. But from the both of us, I guess, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Auf Wiedersehen.
How you doing, kid? Dino, Lou. You got business with the Don?
Nah, we just trying to talk to that cabbie over there, that's all.
That right?
Yeah.
Well, this here's the Don's favorite driver. So anything you gotta say to him, you can say to me.
Is that right? Well, I'll tell you something, pal. We ain't leaving empty-handed, that's for sure.
Well, then maybe you ain't leaving at all.